We are living now through a profound crisis of the American empire. The United States runs an empire in the world. The United States denies that it runs an empire. It is inconceivable to Americans that they can run an empire. But if what you mean by an empire is a system in which you permanently try to order the markets and states of the world in conformity with your national interests, which is roughly the way Michael Ignatieff defines an empire, and he's a fan of the American empire, that'll do for me as a definition. The United States has an empire. It doesn't like to think of itself as having an empire, both because if you look at the Declaration of Independence of 1776, which states the case of all peoples to their right to self-determination, doesn't like that for ideological reasons, and also because the Americans don't like the fact that when you mention the word empire, you're talking about things that rise and fall, and they know that. So it gives them a sort of sense of mortality, that if they go up, they're going to go down, so therefore you don't want to be called an empire. But this American empire, which exists, is now facing the most fundamental of imperial problems, which is the problem of overstretch. Empires throughout history have often invested too much in expanding too much, and they have debates about how large an empire they can actually govern. The Romans had debates about that. The Romans had to decide whether the Scots were worth governing, and they decided they were not. The Romans also had the same debates the Americans have now about how high taxes should be, because rich people, upper classes, have never liked to pay taxes. And in the latter centuries of the history of the Roman Empire, they didn't pay enough. And the Roman legions ran down, and increasingly the barbarians took over the running of the legions, and the Roman Empire fell apart. The Americans today are going through that kind of process. They are an overstretched empire, both militarily and economically. The U.S. now produces about 20% of the goods and services in the world, compared to 50% at the end of the Second World War. The projections are that within the next 15 to 20 years, that'll fall to 15%. In other words, this is an empire that's too big and that's got to pull back. And I think there are two choices, two ways the U.S. can go. The U.S. can either go the way of Rome, and this is in the period, the last days of the Republic, and that is to go through a period of facing up to its imperial realities and becoming a tougher, less democratic, more imperial, more martial people. They can go that way. It's very hard for them to go that way. Their whole culture cries out against it. Their whole desire for, self-realization now cries out against it. On the other hand, they can move back toward disengaging to a certain extent from imperial obligations around the world to create a more multilateral future in which the position of the United States can be more realistic